Hello, I'm Dr. Pebbles Turbyville, and welcome to Webinar Wednesday with Horses and Humans Research Foundation. And tonight, Tara Mahoney is going to be our MC, so I'm going to pass it to her.
Well, welcome everybody. We're so excited to have you here. We have a huge crowd. Of course, Aviva seems to do that. One of my absolute favorite people in the industry. How she combines her passion and professionalism is always so impressive. So you guys are in for a treat tonight. Again, I'm Tara Mahoney. I have the honor of serving on the Horses and Humans Research Foundation board and co-chair of the education committee with my partner in crime, Cheryl Miola. We are busy, so stay tuned for lots happening in 2023. So Aviva, oh my gosh, we're so excited to learn about this and give us some of the inside information about really what the experience was like. Certainly we want to know the content and all of the information in your presentation, but we definitely want to deep in and hear what the insider backtrack was. So go ahead and give it a start. If you don't mind introducing yourself, we're really looking forward to learning and listening.
Thank you so much. And thank you for having me here tonight. Thank you everybody for joining, especially in your evenings. I'm so excited to see both familiar faces from the industry, as well as shout out to some of my students from our mental health policy class. So one of the really exciting things that we're actually going to be able to talk about tonight is this program or intervention specifically, but also its larger impacts throughout the equine assisted services as a whole, and the kind of implications and need for research, which is my love. So as you said, Tara, it's my love of horses and the EAS industry and my professional interest around research and advancing our field. So with that, I am the program director over at Fieldstone Farm Therapeutic Riding Center in Chagrin Falls, Ohio. And in my capacity there, I am responsible for research and education. In addition to that role, I'm also on faculty at Syracuse University, where I'm in the social work program and I'm a licensed social worker. So I bring together a couple different hats, if you will, of practitioner, educator, and researcher, which really made me interested in this opportunity. So,
what don't you do? My goodness, busy lady.
Ride as much as I want to.
Right? Besides being a mom and everything else.
And mom too. Yeah.
All right, tell us about it.
So what I'm going to say is that because we only have a finite amount of time tonight, I'm not going to go into the history of the NanoWar project in and of itself. There's a beautiful website, which we can both put in the chat and give you resources to. There are papers that have already been published that came out through Columbia University's research team and Dr. Prudence Krell, and they are wonderfully stated that explain what is the intervention, how was it validated, how did it get into somebody like my hands. So I don't want to go too far into those details. What I want to do is spend time tonight on what did our team actually do and then what did we find, right? But as a high level, because we all want to be on the same page, the NanoWar project was developed because there was an existing understanding that veterans and those who have served in the military are seeking out equine assisted services for emotional, social, and interpersonal needs, right? They're coming to us and saying, hey, I'm here. And yet we also have the research evidence going back to around, I believe it was 2011 with Anestis' paper that basically said the Department of Defense should not support veterans to participate in equine assisted services until we have rigorous validated research, right? Well, as much as I read that paper and my heart broke a little bit because it's what I do on the ground, I said, you know what, there's actually some truth to this. We should have research to support what we are offering. Absolutely. So rather than get mad, let's do the research, right? And so now if we come forward 10 years, we are starting to see that research. And what we're talking about tonight is one example that, based on our findings, support moving forward. So if we think back to where did NanoWar come from, an individual's vision that said, if we can standardize what individuals engage in with the horses and and make this a researchable intervention, we can then advance practice. Okay, so let's build a curriculum that says, what do you do each week? Right? What is it? Script it out. And then what do you say as a practitioner? How do we start sessions? Like really, let's get nuanced in it. And then they partnered, right? So it was Columbia University and PATH. And they came together and said, we can actually now train our teams to go out and provide this intervention with the understanding that we will collect data and do quality analysis so that we can say whether or not this works. Okay. So that's how my team entered into this, is an understanding that research is important and we need a curriculum. And here's an example. Now, because I like to ask the bold questions, I had said, can I see the curriculum first, please? Can I make sure that we can actually do everything that's asked of us? So for example, at Fieldstone, we may have 2 groups going on at the same time. And so loose horse activities are not always possible. And yet, when we are working on the ground with individuals and horses, how many of you frequently see at liberty exercises? Right? So if I can't do it, then I'm not being, I don't have the fidelity to that model. I'm not upholding the standard of the model. That's not good research. So I said, please, oh, please, can I please read this curriculum and promise that I could uphold what it is we're saying we would do? And I was allowed to read through it. And my response to it was, oh my gosh, you guys, this is what we do. Right? So that's important because up until that point, I've been running a group for 5 years without collecting data, without doing research, without being intentional about it, right? Here's my group that comes together. We love each other. We support each other. We trust each other. We do all the things with the horses. But we weren't intentional about it. And it was, now I'm recognizing that as a missed opportunity for our field. Right? So what we needed to do is move from doing the work to engaging in evidence-informed practice. So we have this very literal curriculum. It is a binder, right? Excuse me. The training required me as the program director, to put together a team. And so I had the team of 3 of us who would be committed to facilitating the sessions that we're trained to be in charge of for this intervention, right? So it doesn't mean, oh, well, the 2 of us will do it this time, right? Or, oh, I'll do it, but I'll pull somebody else in, right? We're saying, nope, maintaining fidelity to this model means the 3 of us will get trained and then we will do the thing, right? And the interesting thing about this is that if we think big picture about why horses, right? Why veterans want horses, right? Why are we even talking about investing training? So time, our center is time, our center is dollars, right? It's because who walks in our door matters, right? Each individual person matters. And what we noticed is that the individuals, I'm going to go with the term veterans because most of them are not reserves and are not current service. They are truly veterans. So the veterans who walk in our door, we're saying, I've never been around horses before. I have PTSD. Do you want me to prove it? To which I was like, no, I don't need you to prove anything. Thank you for coming in. And many of them were facing social isolation. That was like that for the last 2.5 years, that's been the big thing. So when I looked at the research for this project and I saw it's novel, it's something consistent, and it's unpacking what we call mechanisms of change, or the elements that are necessary to create a change, a positive change for a person, I felt like we had to do it. The interesting thing about this is that the intervention does not directly address trauma. Okay, now it's really important because I'm sure some of you in the room may be mental health clinicians, right? Or ESMHL or some practitioner who sits with somebody and talks about the really hard stuff, right? With intentionality. That's great, right? That is necessary. This intervention does not. This intervention is talking about what's coming up for you in this moment. right? How are you feeling right now? I'm feeling really anxious right now. How can we regulate, right? So we're talking about what I would consider mindfulness, what's happening in the moment, which may tie back to prior experiences or future fears, but it is not, the direct question is not what happened to you. And to me, that's really important because our group is not seeking to do therapy. We are seeking to be therapeutic. And as an intervention, that's training a CTRI, so a certified therapeutic riding instructor, an equine specialist, and a mental health clinician. We are not looking to do therapy with the group of, in my case, it was a group of 6 individuals, right? In that moment, but we were looking to provide a therapeutic environment. So it's a very important distinction. So the goals were to establish efficacy and effectiveness for within the equine assisted services for supporting individuals with post-traumatic stress. Right? Those are the stated goals for this intervention. And we do that through 4 different overt objectives. Increasing social emotional skills. This was important and relevant to us because, as I said, when we had so many of our veterans were saying, I am isolated. The only time I'm coming out is to come to Fieldstone, right? I am not engaging in other areas, right? Those kind of things. I'm like, okay, great. Social and emotional and skills, it's going to be so important right now. Fine. Recognizing emotions. So I actually do this with my classes. At the start of most of my classes, I pull up a feelings wheel and I say, how are you feeling today? Because most of us know happy, mad, sad, calm, right? But there are so many more nuanced emotions. And when we pass each other or call or text each other and say, how are you? What do we say? Good. Are you really good? Is good a feeling? Right? And so how can we expect somebody to process trauma and recognize positive change if we haven't first talked about the language with which to understand how we're feeling? So that's an incredibly important facet of this intervention. Then we have goal setting and problem solving. So that is the kind of what we're doing and how we're doing it week to week, and self-regulation. So those are the 4 overt skills that we worked on in this intervention. And I can honestly say to you, those are the 4 skills that we work on at Fieldstone in our veterans programming, regardless of any intervention. So that's where I was like, guys, we do this. This is great, right? Like, this is it. So I don't have to be the one to tell you guys this, but it's in here, right? So why horses, right? So the idea behind this is, if you think about research, we have a responsibility as researchers and practitioners to explain, why is the horse necessary, right? So an intervention that can be done without a horse should be done without a horse for the sake of not having to engage in equine welfare needs and all these other pieces, right? But if you are only going to achieve your hypothesis or a positive outcome, right, through the support of that horse, then you're justifying the need for that intervention. So to do this, we need the horses. Many of our veterans are involved in the VA system. They're already in clinical treatments. They've already tried clinical treatments. They've tried residential treatment programs. They've tried outpatient treatment programs. They've done all the things. Some of them have done yoga and art therapy. They've done wilderness outings. They have tried all the things, and they're still saying, hi, I'm here. I want support. Okay, what makes us different? The horses. I'm not what makes it different. I'm not, right? It is the horses. So it is their size. It is their stature. It is also the fact that they're new. And sometimes in research language, we say novelty is a bad thing. Novelty is not necessarily a bad thing, right? If new means that I keep your attention here and now, that's good, right? So there are ways that we can partner with the horses to achieve outcomes that we otherwise would likely not be able to get. That is what we talk about when we say animal-assisted interventions and animal-assisted therapy, partnering with animals to meet objectives. Now, I know that there's some controversial language around horses mirroring human emotion. For the sake of conversation, what I'm talking about is that instantaneous or in the moment feedback. So many of the participants that I have had an ongoing relationship with, they know how to interact with each other, to get a rise out of each other, or to placate each other, or just to support each other, right? We banter, we joke, we do all the things. They also know how to walk in and say, I'm good. And other people believe them. The horses don't. Right? The horses know what's going on. They know if you're not all right. That's what I'm talking about. So it's the innate reactions that the horses can give to visceral responses, emotional dysregulation, and a lack of concordance between internal and external feelings and emotions. That's the part that's really important. So I can actually say Ranger, who's the horse in the picture here, is really good at this. He's a big horse. He's a stocky dude, and he is very sensitive. And if you come up to him at a 9, let me tell you, he's going to meet you at a 9, and that big head's going to go up in the air. And so to say, okay, how do we get Ranger to take a breath and bring his head back? Right? Well, you've got to take a breath and bring your shoulders. Okay, now we can start together. That's why horses. And I know that many of you have this experience and have experienced it personally as well. So our team, we can't do without the veterans, right? The horses. Like I said, we had an equine specialist, a volunteer, or somebody who, it was a staff, we used a staff member, but for the sake of the training, there's a designation of a person who's a volunteer. So we had a staff member who served as a volunteer, and then mental health clinicians. I will also talk about volunteers additionally in a minute. So we had a team of 3 who went through the training. The horses, we had 3 different groups that I'm going to talk about in a second. We did our best to keep the horses consistent in each group, just to have one less variable. Now, in prior research that I've been a part of, we had a study that came out that actually showed that in our population, the horse bonding, it actually subjectively participants cared if they were with the same horse or not. Their physiological data did not show a difference. But if it makes them feel better, we want to try, right? So if somebody says, I want to work with Dash, the horse on the screen, then we're going to do our best to have Dash there. So we did our best to keep the horses consistent. All right. So the intervention itself. So when I keep saying intervention, I'm using the term intervention because we did research, right? Or we were part of a research study. It could be a curriculum, you could call it a program, you can use whatever language you want to use. It is really important though that the program or the intervention, whatever language I use, the curriculum itself defines what it is and what it's not. So for example, it is therapeutic, not therapy, right? Those kind of distinctions are really important because it sets up the expectations of our team. And it required us to be trained. And then through that training and that specific specificity of language, that's how we're able to have data to share back. So PATH International covered the existing IRB. When we started, actually, I didn't have consents to provide to the veterans, and I went back to the research team and requested to have consents to be able to provide to each one that defined exactly what I just said about what are they doing, what aren't they doing, why are they doing it, what are we going to do with this data, right? So we did end up having consent forms that we gave to every individual, and every participant signed and returned them prior to beginning in this intervention. We had the measures that were provided by PATH, which I will discuss in great detail, but we also had an additional measure that we included from our site, which is just a post-program evaluation. And then there was a portal to upload the data. So we are one team, one site of many who are getting this training and doing the intervention. And so the intention is to collate all of that data together and be able to say, okay, across the EAS industry, what have we found? So I'm sorry, I'm still obviously getting over being sick. So what we did this gets into the fun stuff. So we had a ground-based program. This intervention is strictly on the ground. Groups are up to 6 individuals. It was over 8 weeks. We had horses that were okay with at least 2 people, as opposed to horses that are only good with 1 person at a time, because some of the activities required 2 people at a time. So in the lens of equine welfare, we had to think critically about, okay, if we're going to keep the horses consistent, which horses do we want to bring in from the beginning, knowing what all 8 weeks of activities are going to include? We did do the at liberty activities when we could, and when we couldn't, we modified them within reason so that the activity, the core of the activity, the intentionality, the purpose all stayed intact. Just the horse was not physically loose in the arena. And I can explain exactly what that was. We maintained a strengths-based approach and a solution-oriented approach, which means even when teaching horsemanship skills, right? So how to hold the lead line, we would never say, don't hold it like that. We would say, hey, I'm noticing the lead line is around your hand right now. What can you do to hold it so that your hand is not in the middle of that loop, right? So they're problem solving and staying in the strengths-based mentality, which is really important. If you think about, like, what does it feel like to be critiqued, right? And especially in a group of 6, and especially when you're in a vulnerable place. So that strengths-based approach is really important to engaging in empowerment and interpersonal relationships. Once we had the horses, we had the participants lined up, we had everything set to go. We said, okay, we can do this. Let's finish our training. So we did. And then we had some challenges that we needed to be able to address, such as, okay, if I need this classroom to start, but you're still in that classroom, can you go elsewhere, right? So programmatic pieces that are just so important to think through. We maintained the same team for all of our groups. And we then also had specific volunteers who already support those groups, who are committed to coming weekly, who we then also provided the training as prescribed in the intervention and explained to them, we know that you already come weekly. Now it's really important that you come weekly, and here's why. And so they committed to their participation as well. Okay, that is all of the gearing up. Now I get to tell you what we did and what we found. So, questions before we jump in?
There was one question in the chat that said, are people able to sign up for training and become facilitators? And I directed people saying that the Man of War Project, which is mowproject.org, does do trainings, as well as pathinternational.org, and that's just pathintl.org. And there is a course on there through the Equine Services for Heroes Committee for, I believe it's $3.99 if you're a member, $4.99 if you're not. So
yes, and I know occasionally there are scholarships available as well for teams looking to get trained.
Yep, and especially teams with a veteran on them.
Yes.
So keep sending your questions in the chat, and we'll answer them or wait for the end and let her take it over. Keep going. Thanks.
So, okay. So we had 2 groups on Tuesdays. We had a 10:30 and we have an 11:30. Then we had another group on Fridays that, while this is a weekly program, and I did talk with the research team ahead of time to be like, what do you think about this? That group meets every other Friday. And because they were already established and have been doing that for a very long time, we kept it at every other week. They still completed all of the sessions in order, same duration, same everything. It just was every other week. We ran this from last July through September. So very high level, because I want you to actually do the training and have fun with this and not steal the thunder of what we did. So the first session is an orientation, because you don't have to have new, you may have new participants, but they don't have to be new, right? So we started from scratch. I was like, yep, I've known some of you for 3 years. And guess what? We're doing something different today. Right. And we went through this in a completely new way. And it was actually really fun. Right. So then the second session, we talked about, it's basically pressure and release, right? So to ask a horse to move away from you laterally, how to do that, which all of this is prescribed. Like there's literal language. What does the equine specialist say? What does the mental health clinician ask in terms of how much pressure are you putting or asking? When do you know to back up, right? So what we're doing in that one, the parallel is, how do we approach each other? How much pressure are we coming at each other with, right? Then we moved into, I love this one, the hoof picking, which is how much pressure do you need to ask a horse to lift up their hoof, right? Is it only physical pressure? I'm going to give you the open-ended questions. Again, I don't want to steal the thunder, but like it gets really interesting when you give the open-ended question to a participant and they don't know the options, right? It gets really interesting. Noodle is basically the equivalent of a carrot stick or some kind of extension of your arm for when we're doing longer lead or off lead activities to ask a horse to move away. So now we're bringing in our body awareness and that lateral movement with forward movement. Send away and receive is just like we do in ground pen work, natural horsemanship, all the different modalities of asking the horse to take a step away and then asking the horse to come back to us. Now, this is the one that my team did have to do on lead. And I have done both round pen work and on lead work. And I can tell you the intentionality is the same because we're not asking the horse to leave join up to go to the rail and move around us. What we're asking for is, we're joined up right here. Can you please take one step away from me? Okay. Can you come back to me now? And how do we do that with our body language? And so we actually did it literally with the veteran holding the lead. And then we actually had the volunteer hold the lead and then stand in the position of where they would be if they were in the round pen or off lead to ask the horse to take a step away and then drop their shoulders, use their body language, come back in. And we had the exact same body language conversation between horse and human, which I think is beautiful. Join up and wandering is exactly joining up, right? Coming together, not just being led around the arena, but being in partnership with each other and lockstep. And wandering, literally, what happens if you don't go in a straight line? What happens if we move around, right? And there's so many parallels to life around that, right? An obstacle course. And we did it with actually having, and this is why we said 2 people have to be, the horse has to accept 2 people, 1 person on each side. So if I need the horse to move to the right, what do I have to do on the left? So there's a lot of body awareness, that communication, the social skills, regulation, right? What happens if the horse gets ahead of us and we want to get really nervous? Take the breath, right? So all of these skills are coming into play. Walking a horse across a tarp. Now that one was so much fun because our horses actually hadn't walked across a tarp, potentially since the first day they came and went through the trial process. And that might've been 15 years ago. And all of our horses did it because of the teamwork of the groups. And it was amazing. It was just amazing. And then we do the last one is a closing. And you do something that they want to do together. Our group wanted to go for a really nice long trail walk with the horses in hand, right? So you do something together. It sounds simple because it is what we do, right? This is what we do. What moves it to research is saying all of us are going to do the same thing for 8 weeks and we're going to track outcomes. We're going to get data and we're going to track outcomes and say, is it effective, right? So I'm sure for many of you, this is like, okay, this is what I do. Great. We did do our consents before the first time and before the first session. And then we did the post measures after week 8. Sorry. We had a total of 14 participants who finished all 8 weeks. And And then we did also just do this, what I would call the debrief, which is the post measures, but then we also had our program evaluation as well. So every single session, in addition to that scripted 8 weeks, what it has right in the curriculum is you do an opening circle. I was like, they're never going to do an opening circle. They love the opening circle. It was amazing. It has built so much community that we're still doing opening circles and we still come back together at the end and close out together. It has shifted in such a positive way for our group. So we do an opening circle, the horse greeting, the activity, which I've now explained, and then a closing circle. So what did we find? So this gives you the breakdown. So we do have about 2/3 male to our female population, majority white because location of also where we are, right? We're in Chagrin Falls, Ohio, and it is representative of our demographics for better or for worse. I thought that actually the age demographics were very interesting. We have a very big spread across the ages. And interestingly, they are also spread out across all classes. So it's not our 65 to 85-year-olds are all together at 10:30 on Tuesday morning, right? It's not like that. It's across all of our classes. So I did think that that was really interesting, and it shed light on some of like the mentorship pairs that I've kind of seen naturally form and things like that. And I was like, oh, this is why we collect data. We learn interesting things. On the whole, majority or all of the participants attended an average of 6.2 sessions. Again, they liked this opening circle. Right. So I liked having a quote. So we would start with like a quote or a piece from a book or something that we would say, you know, this came up as something that I think might relate to what we do today. I don't know. You tell me. Right. So I like having those quotes to mull over. We were reading The Body Keeps the Score as a group beforehand. And so that came up in the initial sessions. And it came up as like oh, that's what's coming up for me right now. So I thought that was interesting. That's reflected. If you haven't read the book, I highly recommend it. And then interestingly, leading was the favorite core activity, but everything else was equal, right? So I thought we were going to see like, this is my favorite and then this, and I didn't like that. Like not at all, right? It's very much middle of the road on everything that we're doing. And then we did ask on our program evaluation about 1 through 5, 5 being the highest score, how helpful, how welcoming, how much care and concern, how approachable, and how knowledgeable were the staff and volunteers. I was happy with that too. So, again, this is on our evaluation for the individual's perceived benefits. So did you reduce anxiety? Did you improve in confidence, right? From 1 to 3, again, 3 being the highest. I love that, right? We're seeing gains across the areas that the individual said was important to them. That to me is good work. We also have a standard question on mindfulness, even though that was not an intention or stated objective of this intervention, but when you're with the horses, how mindful do you feel? How focused in the moment do you feel? And I love that they said 8 out of 10. Like that's just like a nice, warm, fuzzy feeling. And thankfully, no incident reports. Like that's just a beautiful thing. So we have 8 sessions of activities that are safe. Yay. So this is coming from the veterans directly. When we did that debrief conversation, and I thought it was really interesting because we did call it the Ban of War Project. And a number of them said, can we change the name? Right. They were, in their own words, triggered by the name. So we just kept calling it our veterans group. I said, we're going to just do this. We're going to do this thing for 8 weeks. Right. And I thought that was really interesting because, you know, man of war, racehorse, and it's something very specific and it's right. And I was like, oh, that'll work. You know, they were very specific about, I'm not loving that. So I'm curious if that's going to come up for other centers as well. The impact. So the question is, what impacted you the most over the last 8 weeks? And the answers to that were being with the horses, learning and hearing passages. So that opening session, hearing something that I could ground myself in during the activity, staying in the moment, and the calmness of the horses, how smart they all are and all different as we are. And then the next question that one of the last questions we asked is, what is an experience that you want to bring with you into your daily life from here? And I love that they said, that it's calming, that it warms my heart, that I want to remember the strengths. So remember I said strengths-based perspective, like that is so intentional for them to then pull the strengths that I'm learning forward means that we were using the language correctly. So then the other measure that we had was it's a PTSD screening tool that is very frequently used in the VA. It is a numeric answer. So it's all Likert. The first page has some open-ended questions. Then it goes into 1 through 5, so Likert scales. And then it has like kind of range questions, like in the last 7 days, how often have you felt? And it gives you answers, and you choose A, B, C, D. So of the screener, there then are these 4 subscales, and the subscales then are combined for a total PTSD score. What we see here that's most important is that across all subscales and the total scale, there was a decrease in PTSD symptoms, clinical PTSD symptoms. And for the total PTSD, the average was above the clinical line for PTSD, and post-intervention fell below the clinical cutoff for PTSD. Now, I'll get to this in the limitations as well, but I want to throw it out now. The challenge with this is there's a couple challenges with this measure. One is that it is not specific to the intervention, right? So all of these other questions that you saw me answering to, right, are what did you like about the horses? What did you like that we did? How did it make you feel, right? These are questions that are specifically about their experiences in the last 7 days or the time frame specified on the measure in regards to their own PTSD symptoms. So they may or may not actually be thinking about the intervention when they're answering this, which is part of research, and that's okay. But it is something that I was like, if only there was a measure, right, that would do PTSD within EAS, but that's me wanting to be, creating measures all the time. So while not significant, the total score change from pre to post had a moderate effect size. That's important. The post-assessment scores went from above that clinical range to below, and all measures of the subscale decreased from pre to post. An improvement in avoidance was significant and had a moderate effect size. Now that one's important because remember what I said about social isolation, right? So we're seeing a change in behavior that's related. And then improvement in negative symptoms was not significant, but again, had a moderate effect size. So small population, a small sample population, when taken with the larger teams that go through this, I'm so interested to see what we find, because the effect sizes to me right now are what's important, not the statistically significant. We don't have enough of a sample to really dig into that piece. Right. We had one veteran who did not complete the program because of relocating. Almost everybody completed the measures in full, and when they weren't, we were able to clean them enough to have obviously usable data to analyze. The depth of the qualitative feedback was just delightful. I just love that. And post-traumatic stress symptoms were going in the right direction. So not statistically significant, but they were going in the correct direction for what we would hope to see from this intervention. So limitations overall, like I shared, that Friday group was every other week. Maybe that has a bias or an impact, right? We don't know. We had asked approval and it was known that that's how we were going to roll it out. But it's just a thing. One veteran moving out of state. So I'm curious, that huge age range, right? And the difference in gender and gender expression, does that have an impact, right? Like, what would happen if this was all women's group? What would happen if everybody was 65 and older, and then we did another group that was 30 to 50, right? What would that look like? Which is not necessarily a limitation, it's just call for more research. And then the measures themselves, as I just said, so the measures that are provided by the intervention are not specific to measuring the intervention's impact directly. I personally see that as a limitation, but I also say that with a caveat of, we don't have measures for the EAS industry, right? There is one measure for affiliative bonding between a horse and child, and it doesn't even have meaningful cutoffs. We have one new measure for horse and human bonding, but it's for those who own horses, right? We don't have good measures yet in our field, and it is an area that needs research. We have demographics. So the protocol calls for collecting data. We did not ask the data specifically of our veterans because our annual student paperwork has it. And so it was just a different change in the measures themselves. That again was approved and was fine, and we submitted everything we needed, but it was a change to the measures. There was definitely some exposure bias. They've completed the PTSD screener ad nauseum at the VA. They knew their answers before we sat down. Now, the biggest place that I would love to see a minor change to how this is delivered is the first question on the screener says, what is your most traumatic memory or experience? Mm-hmm. And if you have a new person and the person asking it isn't trained to manage that, and they're here for horses, right? There's just a big disconnect. So again, that's where we come to appropriateness of measures. Data was underpowered overall. And I mean, it's a weak causal design because we had a small sample. So overall, we loved doing the sessions. We continued to bring some of those activities into our work. In the future, I absolutely intend to run it again. We will have a slightly different team. So we'll go through the training again. We'll keep the fidelity to the model. I would love to see some other measures evolve in our field as a whole, but also brought into here. I'm going to continue to work on this navigating the on-lead off-lead thing, because I certainly understand the benefit of at liberty, and it is a challenge. We are going to try to find ways to share out our data. Thank you for having me tonight. And I would say that we had some positive results that I'm so thankful to be able to share with you here.
Thank you so much. I mean, it's such a fantastic program in a lot of ways, just groundbreaking to have this much collaboration, multi-sites, all of those different things. Wanted to share with everyone that the Man of War Project does have the published research available for free. So that's even a huge part. It is awesome bedtime reading if you can't sleep, but actually, just kidding. The depth of it is fascinating. And one of the things that's really interesting on it is the functional and structural changes of the brain. Yes. So I did fMRIs with some people pre and post, and to actually see this intervention changed functional and structural, brain is incredible. It was really surprising, actually, Aviva. I don't know, if you want to speak on this, but they weren't looking at, the memory systems or executive functioning systems. It was the caudate. So that's a part of the brain that actually really looks at reward. It looks at motivation. It looks at, emotion, even love, kind of like romantic feelings and stuff. Yeah. So basically it said people feel good.
Yes. So, and that ties to, so for me personally, it's really interesting because a lot of my other research is in physiological data. So I look at things like oxytocin and cortisol and say, okay, well, what's actually changing in the moment? Yeah. They were able to do fMRI because of the partnership with the university. But if somebody here is interested in doing this work and wants to also then be able to add in those identifying mechanisms of change, there are ways that you can do it in the field. So, in addition to how amazing the initial research is, the other piece is that you can do it.
Mm. Yeah, it's replicable, right? I
Yeah.
think that's a really important thing. Standardized and replicable. So many people are doing so many different things in the industry. Can I get to a few of the questions? Are you ready for
Yes,
those?
please.
Got some great stuff on the chat here. From Jasmine, what level of awareness, knowledge does the equine therapist have in regards to mental health? Is it just a cohesive therapeutic strategy or relationship, or are they well-versed of both?
So in our team, it was well-versed. So we actually had a team of a licensed independent social worker who has been in the field for 25 years. And then I'm also a licensed social worker, just not at the independent level. But I've had my license for almost 15 years. And I was the equine specialist. I also have the ESMHL. So I was the equine specialist. She was the mental health clinician. And then the third person was our volunteer, who's also staff, who is not a mental health clinician, but I would say is like a self-aware human.
Great answer. Yep. So George, kind of following up on that, said, did the volunteer receive special training such as military cultural competency, mental health first aid? Perfect.
Yes. So I wish that we had been able to do some of those standardized trainings like mental health first aid or ECPR, but we're a premier path center. And so one of the standards that we uphold is that all of our volunteers who participate in any equine facilitated psychotherapy, which would be our at-risk youth, which I hate the term, but is veterans, any of those programs, they have to go through a training first. So we have an organizational level training. And then before we started this session, we said, hey, like I said before, hey, we know you already do this weekly thing. We're actually going to do this special curriculum for 8 weeks. Let me tell you about it. Make sure that you're good with it. And then I need you to commit to actually being here for the 8 weeks.
Perfect. Yep. So there wasn't any team turnover.
No.
Consistent. Yep. Okay. On that sense, so staff and team, if a veteran missed a session, was there an opportunity for a makeup session? That's kind of part of
if it was within the same week. So if somebody missed Tuesday, they could come to the Friday if that was in the week that we had, because it's every other, right? But we were actually able to do that where somebody missed on Tuesday, they came on Friday. I also had one where somebody knew they were going to miss on Friday in advance. And so they came earlier in the week on Tuesday. This is one of the benefits that we didn't have an entirely new cohort. They'd been with us for a little while. So some of them, they might not have known everybody, but they were like, oh, I know that one person. So I'll go on that class. So the reason that was an average of 6.25 is one person was genuinely traveling for more than a week. No, there was no makeup, but the others were able to.
Great, thank you. And Anne Barnfield asked, she just did a lecture on quasi-experimental designs, fascinating, for some undergrads. And there are drawbacks, but also we sometimes do need to use such designs in real life.
Absolutely.
Well said, Anne.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. I just had this conversation actually with a grad student who was like, I want to do research, but I'm at a center, a therapeutic riding center that has never done research. And by the way, they've also never done program evaluation. And I was like, well, why don't we start with program evaluation? And then something's right. There's a reason that one of my favorite books actually is this one too. Community-based qualitative research, right? So there are so many ways to get into community practice where we say, you know what, that randomized control trial, it's pie in the sky and the researchers will do it. In Columbia, thank you so much. And me at my center, I'm going to stick with the quasi thing for a little while because it's what I have capacity for and funding for, and it's what we can do. Great. It still helps our field.
Absolutely. I mean, so many different opportunities. Someone on the education committee, Dr. Elizabeth Richardson at UMass, is putting together really kind of definitions of single case design, A/B structure, all of those different things so that you see all of the opportunities. So great.
Yeah.
Let's see. Maud said, where are the MOW project results available? So that's online. Go to mowproject.org. And you'll see all of the publications. There was an original one that you read first, and then the second one that I was just referring to about the fMRI is also on there. So let's see, Regina says, can you do this without a counseling license, sort of like equine assisted learning instead of equine assisted counseling?
So I believe there is a requirement that one member of the team is a licensed mental health professional, but it can be any of the licensed mental health professionals. So it doesn't have, like we were LISW, doesn't have to be a social worker.
Perfect. George, is there an opportunity for a veteran that completes the program to come back as a program volunteer, either for the military program or the regular TR program?
Yes. So it's funny because I'm always like, I think this one's going to start phasing out and we'll want to do more. And so maybe volunteer or maybe become a CTRI or what, right? And then they like just stay in the program and I love it, right? It's fantastic. So our program is not run on sessions, so they get to just stay if they want to. But I have seen, and actually I just saw Bravehearts just posted somebody who had been a veteran who just got their CTRI and is now their veteran program, something like that, volunteer program. So absolutely, our industry does see individuals who partake of programming and then either give back when they feel like they've gotten what they need, either in the volunteer capacity or by becoming employees, which is fabulous.
So that's a really great question. What we call that in the industry is moving from post-traumatic stress disorder, right, a clinical criteria, to post-traumatic stress, where we're really trying to drop the D to growth. And that post-traumatic growth, I mean, even you think about, say, someone with breast cancer who is going through all of it, and then finally, you know, a year or two later, you know, gets together a team and does the, you know, walk for breast cancer. So that's kind of an example of that same idea of how do you scaffold that up? So great questions.
Yes.
Let's see. We have just 5 more minutes. We will kind of hold some space for some crickets if anybody else has a question. Otherwise, Aviva, could you give us any little, you know, kind of backstories or kind of one of your inside favorite moments, you know, cue the...
Yeah, for sure. So there's two things that I would love to end on. One is definitely a fun and happy moment, but I also want to just share. So the paper that I had referenced earlier is the one that's on the top here. The Anestis is 2014, not 2011. But that was the critical lens of we need to have research in order to make policy change, right? In order for something like the Department of Defense to say, this is an intervention that people should go and do, and we're going to invest in it. So I really want, this is such a selfish want, that our industry recognizes that we can't all do all the things, right? But that we all have a role to play. And so maybe you're the practitioner on the ground. Maybe you're the volunteer. Maybe you can do research. Or maybe you're somebody who does love advocacy and can actually make some moves in the political sphere so that this becomes more accessible. Because I truly do see equine assisted services as a whole as a mental health intervention that does have efficacy behind it now. And I hope that our research continues to move us forward in that way. And so I don't think that everybody has the same role to play, but I think we all have a role to play. So that's kind of like my selfish wanted.
Oh my gosh, you just totally did the best ad for HHRF. Donate to HHRF. Support us, you know, $10 a month, anything, because these research grants are exactly what's moving the needle in the industry, right?
Yeah.
It's supporting rigorous scientific things, just like Aviva said, to change policy and to really make this a billable service.
Yes.
All right. A good inside story. How about that?
So our inside story. So there's so many of them, but okay. So
one quick question, if we have a minute after the inside story.
Yeah, of course.
Is that Maud?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great, Maud. You're next.
My favorite really was so twofold. So one is actually the picture on the screen, which immediately following doing this 8-week session, the veteran that's in the photo had made the commitment of I need to do more. This has gotten me engaged socially. This has given me confidence. I'm addressing the issues and I'm seeing that post-traumatic growth. And so he applied to do Trail to Zero and joined Brave Hearts down in St. Louis at the last PATH conference. Before this intervention, he had never ridden a horse, like not ever ridden, never been on the back of a horse, right? And it wasn't about riding, but it was about what that relationship was and what he was being able to move through. And I think being able to be at that, it was like a finish line, right? It was like the finish line of a marathon.
Awesome. We were all
And seeing it.
cheering. Yeah.
There were tears.
Every Trail to Zero for sure.
But I recognize that not everybody can get on the back of the horse and do that. So the other piece was really seeing this group of 35 to 85-year-old individuals who come from every single diaspora, work together to get a 1,000-pound animal to walk across a piece of plastic, right? Like something that is just so simple that you're like, what is right? And they took 45 minutes of being incredibly patient and calm and talking and working with each other in a way that is just not, honestly, it's not the way that like society works with each other right this minute. And it was just so moving. And every time I thought I had to like be my instructor and be like, don't go behind the horse, right? They had it. They were like, oh, wait, take a step over. He's going to swing his haunch. Like they looked out for each other. They did the thing. And it was just, I have goosebumps thinking about it because it was just so empowering for me to see that they didn't need me. Again, this was never about me. They didn't need me there. They figured it out and they did this because of the work with the horses. That was my why.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you so much. Maud, let's give you a minute. We're just at 7:50.
Yeah, sorry. So
Please go.
I haven't done any research yet, but I've been working with veterans in Canada for about 6 years now. Do you know of any similar research that has been conducted out of Canada and might have been published? Because I'm running into red tape with the Ministry of National Defense in Canada, because every research comes out of the States and they are thick-headed and don't really want to take American research. Even though it's good, it's fantastic, but it's not Canadian. So if you're aware, I'm interested.
Sorry, I don't know a specific study, but what I would think is that PATH International, as the international organization, should have the language and leverage to be able to support getting that research on the ground. And I think of PATH centers like SARI and just whatever that do similar programming, but don't necessarily engage in the research yet. And that is a place for PATH. I'm on the board and happy to help you there. Can and should advocate for you and support you in doing that.
Maud, if you also go to our website, our last grant that we just funded was in Canada with military.
Okay, thank you.
At a university.
Was that Regina by any chance?
No, I'm drawing a blank.
It's okay. I'll go and check it out. Thank you.
Prince Edward Isle.
Yeah.
At the Atlantic Veterinarian College at the University of Prince Edward Isle.
Okay.
They also presented at our conference in Chagrin Falls at Fieldstone last August, and that's on our YouTube channel if you want to see it. And they did a two-part webinar for us last year too.
Excellent. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, on behalf of HHRF, all of you, thank you so much for joining. Thanks so much for sharing your time. We know it's very precious. And Aviva, again, you rocked it. We just love hearing from you, and your brain is amazing the way it works, and your heart is clearly in the right place doing this work. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for sharing the evening with me. And please, anybody, feel free, reach out with any questions. I'm happy to connect and happy to support.
And John,